Good afternoon. Welcome to the UK column, Live. It's the 13th of March 2014 and it's just gone 1 o'clock. Myself, Louise Collins, Brian Gerrish and Mike Robinson are here in Plymouth and it's a beautiful day.
It's a beautiful day for the news. For the news.
For the news.
We'll get there. It's been a lot of programmes. Well, we've got another blue sky, pretty blue sky anyway, and we've got sunshine, and as usual everybody is happy. So we like that, but we also want to keep people's minds on what's really happening in the country. And it's getting pretty serious by the day.
By the end of the show, they're not going to be very happy.
Well, we're doing our best to get the information across. The main thing is we do something about it. So, Mike, you're going to pick up on Lockerbie, which has appeared in the press.
So we put this out in a newsletter last night, but in case anybody didn't see it, last night Al Jazeera showed a documentary called Lockerbie, What Really Happened. I believe it's going to be repeated tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. UK time. The documentary sort of moves away from the notion that Libya was responsible for the Lockerbie bombing, and they instead put the blame on the Syrian-based Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command, and they're really trying to deflect attention towards Iran and Syria with this. So that seems to be the new agenda. But in fact, we published an article in the UK Column newspaper in June of 2012, which was written by Tony Shell, and you can find that article now on the front page of the UK Column website. What the Al Jazeera documentary didn't appear to be covering was the role of a gentleman called Basil Bushnak, and why the Crown Office of Scotland have tried so hard to conceal his name. They also didn't mention, we understand, the role of the Mossad operative Salah Kouiks, aka Ramzi Diab, who was an active key member of the PFLP GC terrorist cell. So if you'd like to know any more about these issues and the questions that are raised, have a read of the article. Please distribute it as widely as possible, and let's see if we can't add a bit more information to the to what Al Jazeera has been putting out, which again seems to be limited.
It seems to be significant, Mike, doesn't it? This story's suddenly come to the forefront again, but as you pointed out there, the connections into wheeler dealing north of the border. Around the would have been the Procurator Fiscal's office at the time, raises a number of very interesting questions, and we seem to have got things covered up basically. So Ukraine.
Indeed. Right, Ukraine. We're not going to talk too much about Ukraine today because Patrick Henningsen will be on the programme with me tomorrow. So we'll keep most of the Ukraine discussion until then. Just to highlight continuing escalation, because Belarus has now decided that they need to ask support from Russia because of the increasing levels of NATO activity on the Polish side of the border, as we mentioned yesterday. And in the Ukraine itself, following comments made by President Yanukovych while he's been in Russia. I think we talked about that a couple of days ago, that the Ukrainian army would not obey orders issued by the new junta. In the Ukraine, it looks like they've decided now to create a National Guard, a new army. And they're using the excuse that the previous government had allowed the Ukrainian infantry to fall to 6,000 men. And they're trying to say that this is no longer sufficient to defend the Ukraine, so they are building a new army, it looks like, and of course we understand the sort of political ideology that this new government seems to be based upon. It isn't so nice, so perhaps this new army won't be so nice either.
It's getting very messy, isn't it?
Everything's getting messy, but if you do put the jigsaw pieces on a table and move them around, they're starting to fit. So whilst we've got the mess going on in Ukraine, and there's no doubt that a lot of the trouble and the violence and the general decay in Ukraine has been stirred up by certainly the Western powers, so that's Britain, America, and in particular the European Union. What's Mr. Cameron been doing? Well, he's been off, presumably, getting instructions from Israel. And once again, we've got another major headline where David Cameron has been boasting about his Jewish ancestors, about his background. This is the man, of course, who said that his faith in Israel was unshakable. And the UK column was the only publication that we know of that was brave enough to say, is this man trying to serve two masters? And of course, the biblical advice on that is it will come to ruin, because you will love one and hate the other. So our real question for Mr. Cameron is, who is your master? Is it Britain as a nation state, or is your allegiance really to Israel? If we just have a look at this picture, here he is doing the business. So with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And let's just have a look at some of the things that have been discussed. So it was a 2-day tour to Israel with a delegation from the Holocaust Commission, including, it should be survivors. That's not a UK column spelling error. That's the Telegraph, which proves that anybody can do it. So we've got a lot on the Holocaust and Auschwitz, and we just picked up on this last sentence here. I want every child in Britain to learn about the Holocaust and to understand just how vital it is to fight discrimination and prejudice in our world. Now, the reason we've picked up on this is that the UK column team is seeing some very, very dangerous precedents occurring in UK in the way people are treated. We've been reporting about paedophilia, we've been reporting about trouble in the NHS, but Mike is going to take us into some pretty shocking stuff which is starting to emerge. And surely if Mr. Cameron is worried about what took place under the Nazi regime, he should be very worried about what we are seeing emerging in Britain, shouldn't he? We'll see. Mike.
Well, indeed. The National Audit Office, according to the Telegraph here, warning that families and the NHS are being placed under what they call unsustainable pressure by cuts to care services for the elderly and the vulnerable. They're reporting that despite a government pledge to protect social care from the impacts of austerity, spending on help for older people in England plunged by 12% in just 2 years in real terms. But really, the Telegraph article here focuses on the fact that, quote, cuts come at a time when need is greater than ever, with the number of people over the age of 85 growing at a faster rate than the overall population. And this article is really doing what it's designed to reinforce the notion that we can't afford the useless eaters that are the elderly and vulnerable, for that matter, and really should do something about it. And it's just, I mean, this is one article taken out of a whole stream of articles going back several years now that we've commented on from time to time. Every time one of these articles comes up, we mention it. But I just wanted to highlight this poster from 1930s Germany, and the text there says 60,000 Reichsmark is what this person suffering from a hereditary defect cost the people's community during his lifetime. Fellow citizen, it's your money too. So, you know, this is exactly the policy that we seem to be, or that certainly this is exactly the message that we seem to be getting from the mainstream media almost on a weekly basis now, alongside, particularly in the last year, 18 months, the right to have a good death. And it's being constantly pushed in the press, the right to have a good death, and this focus on having a good death and so on, rather than caring for people. This poster, of course, was there to advertise Hitler's T4 euthanasia program, and some people may feel that it's a bit unfair to possibly even extreme to suggest that there's any similarity between what happened in 1930s Germany and 1940s Germany and what's happening today, but I don't think it is unfair, actually. Because the similarities in the types of language used and the propaganda that's being pushed are too stark.
Well, could I just add to that, Mike? Of course, one of the things that we have continually been researching and warning about is the desensitisation of people, and we've been talking about this in particular with the police. We see the police acting in a much more brutal way. We're also seeing that sort of trouble with people in the NHS system itself. And of course, desensitisation was a key part of that T4 programme in Germany, where people who were going to handle victims in the mental institutions, people who were mentally ill or extremely physically disabled, they were desensitised in order to take the action they did. So there are some really frightening parallels we're beginning to see between what was going on pre-war in Nazi Germany and what has started to emerge in UK. And perhaps we should add to that if we look for a common link, of course, we're going to come straight back to the psychiatric institutes which have been pushing the agenda in the direction of desensitisation, but also population control and eugenics. So there's some serious connections through the main psychiatric organisations, of which the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Germany was one of the key ones, and also the New York Institute of Psychiatry, which brings us back, of course, to the Tavistock Institute in London.
Right. Well, of course, it doesn't end with that type of propaganda, because as Norman Tebbit highlighted a couple of days ago in the Telegraph again, he's also seeing dangers in current policy, certainly current policy trends. And this time he's talking about the forthcoming assisted dying bill, which is being promoted by Lord Faulkner. Tebbit's calling this a potential slippery slope. He says, now the former Labour Lord Chancellor, Lord Faulkner, plans to bring in his assisted suicide bill to allow doctors to provide lethal medication and assistance, if needs be, to patients they believe have less than 6 months to live. He goes on to say, I'm sure that it is not the intention of Lord Faulkner to set us on this slippery slope to involuntary euthanasia or even to the full legalisation of suicide, but I have no doubt that if passed, the Faulkner bill would prove to be the stalking horse for those who do. The implication from this statement that I've just read out there, now the former Lord Chancellor, Lord Faulkner, plans to bring his assisted suicide bill. That the implication of that is that this is some kind of new thing from Faulkner, but in fact, there he is. In fact, he's been campaigning on the subject for years, alongside Lord Joffe, Patricia Hewitt, Baroness Jay, who was the ex-head of the Met, Blair, Lord Blair, who's now Lord Blair. He's also one that's been campaigning for this. And having failed at his first attempt to achieve the change in the law through Parliament, Faulkner resorted to, he joined up with Demos and set up the Commission on Assisted Dying. And this had support from this lady, Baroness Warnock, who is considered one of Britain's leading, quote, moral philosophers. So she talks about ethics and morality and all kinds of stuff like that. And she's also a long-standing UK government, was made a life peer. And I've got some quotes here from her. Now, I'll just address this issue of context because people may view that these have been taken out of context, but actually in the context of the policy thread that's been building for the last 20 years or so, I don't think these are out of context. But one of the things she said was elderly people suffering from dementia should consider ending their lives because they're a burden on the national health system and their families. And something else she said from the same article, pensioners in mental decline are wasting people's lives because of the care they require and should be allowed to opt for euthanasia even if they're not in pain. And finally, from the same article, she said that she hoped that people would soon be licensed to put others down if they're unable to look after themselves.
Oh, I hope she gets put down then if that's her views.
Well, that's
terrible.
It is a terrible view, and but you know what can you say? We have an aging population. We're being told that of course we can't afford an aging population. We're being constantly told that, and we're really being told that aging population is too much of a burden on the life of the British people, and I think that's a really wrong situation. I think this idea of you're being a burden on your family, and so you should kill yourself and get rid of yourself because you're too much of a burden on your family. This is a step too far. Mm-hmm. If you assisted suicide for somebody that's really in clinical need and a lot of pain, and where palliative care can't help them, then perhaps there's justification, but not for just because you're a burden on your family. This is wrong, in my opinion.
I think it's more than wrong. I think it's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, and the other thing is the pond that all this is appearing in. Of course, we've had the NHS, where some papers were reporting up to 100,000 deaths. They were certainly talking of deaths in their tens of thousands in relation to what was going on around failures in hospitals, and of course, in particular, Mid-Staffs Hospital. And Mr. Nicholson is still there as chief executive of the NHS, so he was supported by David Cameron, even those multiple deaths have gone on. And of course, another so-called ex-communist running the NHS, and we're seeing dead bodies come out the door. Mike?
Just to end this, I wanted to, on a particularly depressing note perhaps, but I wanted to just read out the declaration that Hitler made when he initiated the T4 programme, and just listen to the language of it and compare that with the type of language that we're seeing being promoted by the mainstream media at the moment. The declaration said, Reichsleader Buhler and Dr. Brandt are charged with the responsibility of enlarging the competence of certain physicians designated by name so that patients who, on the basis of human judgment, are considered incurable can be granted a mercy death after a discerning diagnosis. And you just see the same type of language, and I find that quite disturbing.
And then you say, is it a coincidence? And we are going to say we don't think it is.
No such thing.
Well, how are people controlled in the establishment? This is a theme which we are not going to back away from, because it is so obvious what's going on here. And our attention was drawn to this Express article, which was from the March the 2nd. We missed it at the time, but this was a particularly good overview article of the problem of paedophile networks running at the highest levels of government. And it was an article produced by Sonia Poulton. And I'd encourage people to go onto the internet and see if you can call this particular article up, because Sonia has provided a very concise overview of the situation to do with paedophile rings, which are clearly connected to the highest levels of government. And she's pointing out that still we are not seeing any proper investigation or police action in order to bring those high-level paedophiles to book. Why do we need to do this? Well, we're going to return to the case of the mother and her daughter in Cleveland, and indeed Emma, the lady who has recently been sectioned in Cornwall. We're going to put this in because we're now starting to see a very, very dangerous picture emerging in this country. So here we are, the mum and her daughter, and what has now happened since they appeared in court is the story has blasted all over the media, with national papers now picking up on reports from local papers. So this is the Hartlepool Mail, and here's the campaign, Mum and Daughter's Hate Campaign, including threats to kill baby and branding an innocent vicar a paedophile. So it was also picked up here in the Northern Echo. Mother also in court for bombarding police with calls. And of course, once the rot had started with these local tabloids, in comes the Mail, clearly done no research at all, simply picks up on what the other papers are reporting. Mother and daughter guilty of sending abusive Facebook messages claiming an innocent vicar was a paedophile and threatening to kill a neighbour's granddaughter. And then in come the accusations. Lynn, 54, and Natalie, 21, targeted their local community. Viet threatened to kill their neighbour's 8-month-old granddaughter. She also sent Facebook messages claiming a local vicar was a paedophile. And Portuguese made 22 hoax 909 calls to Cleveland police in just 4 days.
I was under the impression, they've listed all the other complaints. They've listed about death threats and everything else. And the final one that they've listed is they also made phone calls to accused a local priest of being a paedophile. But this is how it all started, was it not? Well, because they had gone onto a they'd found out that there were links to paedophilia, And so then they were phoning the police to make them aware, but they've kind of put that, like it was an extra thing, extra case.
This is absolutely right. So what we're going to do is we'll have a look at this in very simple terms, and we're going to leave it to viewers and listeners to decide. But sorry, Mike, if you just bring that one up on screen for a second. Here is the mainstream media. They've absolutely destroyed these women in the public mind. These women are guilty. They're vile people. They're making accusations. They're making hoax calls to the police. These are vicious, vile women. So let's have a look at the women. Well, here's Lynn. Here's the mum, and this is how she normally looks. And let's put alongside that how she looked once she had been beaten to the ground by Cleveland police and either pepper sprayed or CS gas. The papers have not reported this. They've not reported the fact that these women were literally beaten black and blue by the police. None of this appears in their investigation, and when we spoke to one of the local papers yesterday, it was very clear that the local paper had simply taken all of the information which was repeated in court, and we're going to come on to that. Let's put her face up again. Here's Cleveland Chief Constable Jackie Cheer. Well, we don't think there's anything to cheer about in this subject. It's quite disgraceful, this case. But Louise, to answer your very good question, let's take a look at what's gone on here. So we're going to call this a brief chronology, the sectioning of Cleveland mother and daughter. Well, it was the mother, actually, that they went for. What had they done? They'd reported material which they believed indicated a paedophile ring was operating. So let's follow it through. So Natalie and her mother Lynn find disturbing homosexual pornography linked to very young men on Facebook and with connections to their local church. They express concerns to other members of the community who also echo back concerns that certain individuals have previously been suspected of having inappropriate activity with children. We're being very careful with the language we're using today. What happens? Well, Natalie and her mother do what they think is right. So they take their evidence. We're talking factual documentary evidence from the internet. They take their concerns and evidence to Cleveland police, including providing that detailed evidence from Facebook. And what do the police do? Well, very simple. They don't investigate. It sort of rings a few bells.
Doesn't it just?
Robert Green and Holly Gregg. They don't investigate. But the next thing is we've got Natalie and Lynn's home raided by up to 9 Cleveland police. They literally smash their way through the front and back doors. They gas the women. The mother's beaten to the floor and she has to have hospital treatment, bruising, and the effect of the gas on her eyes. They then find that when they try and get solicitors to help them, strange things happen. The solicitors won't act, and certainly at least one law firm appears to have been warned off. They were helping the mother and her daughter quite nicely, and then all of a sudden, they've got a bit wobbly. They don't want to be involved anymore. And then this is the next bit. The women start to be hounded by the authorities, including accusations that the mother's mentally ill. Now, I believe that the mother may have actually been sectioned and held for a week. I couldn't get confirmation of that today, but we do know that both the mother and her daughter are talking about medical records being interfered with and data changed on those records.
Can patients, just as throwing this out there, medical records, it might be worth everybody getting a copy of their medical records, because if things are being interfered with, that you have this proof.
Yeah. Well, I sat in with a couple. This is my personal recollection, but I sat in an interview with a couple in Cornwall who were challenging one of the healthcare trusts in Cornwall for this very fact, that the medical records had been maliciously changed. And as a result of that, the healthcare trust ultimately had to make a compensation payment.
Absolutely.
So, but the facts were there. Malicious information was inserted on somebody's medical record. Very, very sinister, dangerous stuff.
So it is probably worth everybody just getting in touch with their doctors and maybe getting a copy to have at home.
I think that would be a very interesting exercise.
I think I'm going to go and do that exercise.
And I think more than a few people will find a marked reluctance of GPs to release or copies of those records. So let's follow the story through. So they start to be hounded, and here's the accusations that the mother in particular is mentally ill. So the police don't conduct proper investigations or interviews, and they've held the women more or less overnight. They're then released, and then what happens is all sorts of very strange stuff occurs around these women. A hate campaign from the local authority and the local community. So if we see mother and her daughter starting to behave strangely, what the papers are not reporting is the pressure and the hate and the abuse. This is a natural response to people who are put under this intense pressure. I'll just end on this one here. Then in the last couple of days, there was a hearing at Hartlepool Magistrates Court. Natalie and her mother were totally unrepresented. They didn't have any legal representation.
That sounds familiar as well.
Sounds very familiar. So they refused to stand in the court without the representation they were entitled to. And what then transpired? Well, in their absence, without any of the original information about paedophiles coming into the domain of that court, this is what happens. So here we are. Natalie was found guilty of sending by public communication network a message that was grossly offensive or of an indecent, obscene and menacing character, and also using threatening, abusive or insulting words and behaviour. There's mirrors here with Holly Gregg. The people who start to go for the system for not taking the right action, they are the ones accused of being the abusive people. So here's the mother, was found guilty of persistently making use of a public communications network for the purpose of causing annoyance, inconvenience and needless anxiety. So the women who tried to get the police to investigate suspected paedophile activity are the ones who are now victimised in this court. And here's the chairman of the bench, Gareth Hicks, has issued an arrest warrant for the pair to bring them back to the court for sentencing. Now, we're hearing some information, but this is the nub, isn't it? Cleveland police simply refused to investigate the evidence that something was going on, paedophiles, and therefore then they state there's no crime, and when the women, of course, get very agitated, then they become the victims of the system. So this mirrors Robert Greene and the Holly case perfectly.
There was it was directed to me earlier, just before the programme. I didn't get a chance to send it to you, Brian, that somebody has posted, the Sovereign Independent has covered the fact that we covered this story on their website. Somebody's posted a comment on there saying that they went back and had a look at the Facebook page that was the source of the problem in the first place, and that while there doesn't seem to be any explicitly paedophile related information on that Facebook page anymore, despite the allegations that there are still discussions between young men, young teenagers about pornography. And this is the Vicar's Facebook page. So at the very least, the point that this commenter is making is this appropriate for the Vicar to have on his Facebook page, aside from the allegations that the ladies are making?
Yeah, well, lots of questions to be asked, but of course, we did remind one of the local papers yesterday that there's just been this 4 million or 4.5 million investigation into corruption in Cleveland police, and after £4 million, well, nobody's done anything wrong. So let's reinforce this, and we now move on to Cornwall, where we've been reporting on a young mother who was sectioned. What was her crime? She reported paedophilia, and she's still being held without proper representation in a psychiatric unit in Cornwall. Yeah. So let's do the same thing. So here's the brief chronology of the sectioning of Cornish mother Emma, who reported paedophile activity. So she discovered paedophile photographs circulating on mobile phones at a Cornish school. She warned the school that she thought fairly shortly the photographs were likely to appear on Facebook, because that's what people do. And what happened? Well, she received a hostile response from the school, and local child safeguarding rules were changed.
Really? I didn't know that bit.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And then no proper action is taken, and sure enough, the material spreads. And when she goes to the police, what do the police do? They take no action. So where does that lead us? Well, obviously, Emma, as a good lady, starts to complain. She challenges the local authorities as to their failure of actions, and she suggests there's been a cover-up by rewriting safeguarding rules. Well, that produces a response, so local social services start to make contact with Emma, and she quickly begins to fear that actually they're targeting her daughter. And then here we go. The social services and others in the public services start to insinuate that Emma is mentally ill. There does rather seem to be a pattern here. So it becomes obvious that local authority, police, social service and local mental health teams are focusing on Emma. By the amount of contact she's getting from these people, it's obvious they're talking to each other. And what then subsequently happens, just over a week ago, she's detained by police and a mental health team, and she's sectioned under Section 2, which means she can be held for a maximum of 28 days, and she's currently in the secure psychiatric wing of Bodmin Community Hospital, which is managed by the Peninsula Community Care Trust.
You know that when they were trying to medicate her, did they manage to medicate her? Has she been forcibly medicated? Do you know that, Brian, or not?
Well, we can answer that absolutely here, because without her own legal representative present, she hasn't had proper legal representation, certainly in the first week period when she should have had. She was told that if she did not take medication, she would not see her daughter again. That's the first tactic, the psychological bullying. Then she was forcibly medicated, and when she continued to talk of the injustice of it all and the fact of all she tried to do is get people to act on paedophile photographs, her dose was doubled. And the implication of that is they are clearly seem to be intent on destroying her memory.
Have they got her daughter, or is the daughter safe?
The daughter at the moment has been given to Emma's parents.
Good.
So we now see them driving the wedge in between the family. We understand that today there's an appeal against her sectioning, but we can tell viewers and listeners today that she's only recently been able to get a solicitor, and we're not sure that she's got the proper psychiatric representation to represent her own case. So pretty serious stuff.
Very.
We'll add in this. Here's Peninsula Community Health. Recommend people go onto this website, because we're not dealing with the NHS, we're dealing with a not-for-profit service provider who's taken over NHS work. And it's very interesting that basically the big boss, here he is, Steve Jenkins, this is the man with ultimate responsibility for the treatment or not that Emma has had so far. What's he qualified as? Well, he's a social worker. Social worker, and he's had an MBA through the Open University. So we've now got a social worker effectively in charge of 14 hospitals throughout Cornwall, with the ability to pick people off the streets and simply hold them for 28 days under mental health rules.
So he's probably had plenty of leadership training then, hasn't he?
I would think so. So if you're concerned about Emma, our suggestion is that you make contact with the Peninsula Community Health team. But as always, we say, please, if you're going to contact people to express your concerns, remember to be polite and reasonable at all times, because the people who send the abusive emails are clearly not ordinary concerned, I was going to say citizens, I better say subjects, I think. And we'll give you the last bit of the jigsaw here before Louise is going to take us in some equally dangerous territory. But we've now got a trial a programme in Norfolk where more social workers are going to be placed in schools in order to help identify needy children. Well, will they be identifying needy children, or is their role to identify more children to be taken from their parents and put into the machinery of the state trafficking system?
It's just
it's in
horrific.
front of
It's there, it's happening now, and it's scary.
I can see a few people commenting about the news today and saying how we're reacting, but this is very, very serious material we're putting out. We're not making it up. This is in front of our faces, and certainly a lot of people need to deal with it. What's happening with children in schools?
Well, Lib Dems David Laws says that the government are wanting to promote mindfulness. The mindfulness lessons will be taught to primary and secondary state schools to help them cope with stress. I mean, kids should not be being stressed, for goodness sake.
But they are stressed,
They are
aren't they?
stressed
Many
because
of
they're
them.
having so much pressure put on. I mean, the kids are taking their GCSEs now a year earlier, and the stress that that's causing 12-year-olds is just unbelievable. But they want to bring in this mindfulness in school. So I started having a little look around about mindfulness. And according to the Mails and Mr. Laws, it's about trying to impact on people's motivations and attitudes to life. And that's what Mr. Laws thinks it is.
But we're going to apply this to children.
We're going to apply this to children in a group action as well. But really, I went and had a little look around the internet on mindfulness, and it is a form of like meditation. But what concerns me is what are the dangers? So here I found this website, Mindful Construct, and they've listed 17 ways mindfulness meditation can cause you emotional harm. Number one, you start to judge uncomfortable thoughts and feelings as inferior, unreal, or bad. You get good at stuffing anger and other negative emotions deep down, which might make them go away temporarily, but hasn't shown to be very effective. If and when a traumatic or emotional painful experience occurs, you don't fully process it and you cut your grieving process dangerously short. And the list goes on. People can go and have a little look. So I went and had a word with Brian about this mindfulness, and he directed me here. And I know you've done a lot of research in the past to this and the gentleman behind it.
Well, the key point is we're coming back to Oxford University here, and this is their Department of Psychiatry, but now they're running a set mindfulness centre. And it's quite remarkable that if you look around the country to where there's problems, particularly with young people, in come the mental health teams, in comes charities such as Mind. And then what are Mind saying? Well, in order to get over the trauma that many of these young people have got, we're going to bring in the experience of Oxford with their mindfulness training.
Right.
So in my view, they've created a problem by stressing out the minds of children and young people. Now what they're going to do is bring in mindfulness. But of course, we need to remember that we've got a British government operating through the Cabinet Office its own applied behavioural psychology programme. So to me, this is this department here, I'm sorry, I wouldn't trust them further than I could throw them, but they're now using their skills to get straight into the minds of young children.
Yeah, I mean, I like to do meditation in on my own, quietly, calmly, relaxation. But what concerns me if it's being, and who's conducting these sessions with the children in, and say 30 kids, they're going to have, and kids are very susceptible to these sort of things. They really can open up very easily, and that's what concerns me. Who is providing these lessons? I'm all for relaxation, meditation, etc. in my own space. Yeah. But on this scale, and who's guiding this meditation is what's really frightening.
Well, if we dig in deep enough, we haven't got time to cover it today, but we will. If we dig deep enough, of course, we always find that it comes back to the non-government organisations and charities, which are the third sector organisations determining government policy. Mike?
Is it unfair to suggest that when you do this type of thing with on a group, that the effects of it are enhanced, amplified?
Well, I would say so, but we can provide further evidence.
Yeah, I would have thought so because of the amount of energy that's going to be going in and around that room. I think it will be. a lot powerful because you've got all energy. You've got an energy can affect you and it can open you up and things can be brought in. So we do need to look into it more. And I want to have a chat with Paul R in the chat room. If you can email me, please. Thank you.
We do that. One of the things we can bring in is a report that was written by a teacher in Leeds several years ago, where she described the dangers of a programme that she was being taught in order to give young children, which was called creative visualisation. And in the paper the lady wrote, she warned of the adverse effects on her colleagues. So they were there to learn this to use on children, but it was adversely affecting other teachers. Yeah. I'll bring that in on Monday.
I think Mike's, have you got your hand up there, Mike?
No. Okay. Right, so what's happening in care homes?
Okay, when I first saw the story, I thought of old John Coles and his story with his wife Maggie. But an inquiry has been done suggesting that tens of thousands of pensioners and vulnerable people are being locked up in care homes and all their rights being taken away. The Mental Capacity Act, which was passed in 2005, was supposed to protect mental health sufferers. And this new report that's just been released says that elderly are being dumped into care homes to make it easier to control them and to save money. So it's kind of a little bit similar to what Mike was talking about earlier, and to get people to, they're dying and now they want to shut people up, save them money, they're useless eaters. And the policy originally, the Mental Capacity Act, was an idea of Mr. Blair's.
Who was a flatmate of Lord Faulkner, of course, wasn't he?
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
And it was a policy set up by Blair through the Court of Protection, and it appears that the Court of Protection has ordered people to be kept in care homes, and social workers have acted without any legal go-ahead at all. And a woman not long back was sent to prison for trying to actually get her father out of one of these care homes. So a little bit like John Coles as well, and John had to go through courts. He wanted to see his wife. Well, some woman has actually been sent to prison for trying to get her father out of a care home.
Yeah, nice. Well, so this one we couldn't resist. Is this somebody waking up, do you think?
Well, I hope so. It speaks volumes to me. The National Trust has said that no fracking should take place in national parks, but yesterday ministers rejected a blanket ban in the national parks and says it was up to the councils to decide if fracking in national parks should go ahead. And at the moment, the targets for fracking in parks, and I've confirmed all this with Ian Crane as well, are the South Downs National Park in Hampshire, the North Yorkshire Moors, the Peak Districts and the Forest of Bowland. And they don't want it done in their parks because of the health impact and what it can do to the environment.
So notice the government throws the problem onto the local councils because it's too difficult. I'm just going to answer somebody in the chat room there who said that they would hate our reports to be getting mindfulness a bad name in the alternative media. Well, my response to that is, as with all of these things, it's the intent that is the key thing here. If you have a politicised promotion of mindfulness, what is that to do with? So this is a big danger. People say, oh, my friend's a social worker, she's a nice person, so there's no problem in the social services. This is utter nonsense. There are problems and we've got to deal with those problems. So I'm going to say, do your own research, please, into who is actually driving the agenda.
Can I just interject as well? With, the mindfulness in one's own home and relaxation and meditation, I personally don't see as a problem. As I said earlier, it's in the mass scale and who's conducting these sessions with our children who are very easily susceptible. So,
okay. Yeah. Well, we better switch to something more cuddly then. It's getting a bit hot. It's going to be polar bears and climate change, I think.
So the Tory Climate Change Minister Greg Barker has said that no serious voice in government questions climate change, and he was speaking to MPs at the Energy and Climate Change Committee. So I had a little look in to this man.
Does it mean this? I couldn't resist putting this in. Are we on the path to, if you deny climate change, then you're mentally ill?
Yeah, and then you'll probably end up getting locked up in a psych ward or something if you do start saying that. Okay. Social services and hounded you. Well, anyway, I had a little look into our climate change guru, Mr. Barker, and he has a BA's honours degree in history and politics. So yeah, really
He's
up
well
there. He
up
hasn't
on
even
the-
got geography, which I think you'd need to be an expert in climate change. But okay, history and politics. He was a researcher at the Centre of Policy Studies before becoming an equity analyst and director of an advertising company. He has close ties to Russian oil companies, though, and he ended up being Shadow Environment Secretary even after questions were being asked about his links to Russian billionaire Boris Berezovsky back in 2006. Barker actually went on a nice little African trip with King David. His lovely little coat. Oh, bless them.
There's another one here in cold
Sweet,
lands.
isn't it? Oh, chilly. And cuddle up together. His personal life is somewhat of making of a soap opera. He was married to an heiress of Charles Wells Brewery, and they're billionaires.
So this man has sort of come out of nowhere, but he's now an expert on climate change.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And, he was married to an heiress of Charles Wells Brewery and back in 1992, but after stories breaking in The Observer, he confirmed he was gay and left his wife and 2 children for a vintage fashion designer back in 2006.
So an interesting man.
Very interesting.
Right, we're on
man.
the stops for time, so we do
Okay.
this bit very quickly, but since we're on the subject of climate and David Cameron in the land of the reindeer, we picked up on this one yesterday, which was the Mail saying there was a battle to save Captain Scott's lost pictures, and it's the usual story. If we don't do something, these could go to auction and disappear out of the country. We just like to point out, aside from the massive adventure that was, it's an incredible piece of history, but for us it's a bit emotive because here we are, the UK column. I'd like to say that was our whole building. We have a couple of rooms, but you notice that Scott Road, and why are we interested? Because on the other side of the corner we've got a little memorial plaque saying on this site formerly stood Outland's birthplace of Robert Falcon Scott, born 6th of June 1868, and he died on his return from the South Pole. So there we go. And if Mike, if you take that one off screen just for me and just jump through. We're going to give Robert Greene a mention. He's still in prison, but you'd seen an article talking about soft justice or
Yeah,
something.
the
hadn't you?
Express were reporting that 1 in 4 serious crimes result in a custodial sentence, according to a report released today by a think tank, the think tank Civitas, and they've said 26% of indictable crime convictions in 2012 and 2013 resulted in an immediate custodial sentence. Basically, serious criminals are getting left off. They should be in a custodial sentence. They should be in custody.
But Robert Greene
but they're not being.
hasn't
But Robert hadn't done anything.
So he's in prison.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we know this one, don't we? Well, we were told to end this news on a happy note, and the subject is the monkey rescuing the dog. Now, we're taking this little picture at face value. So it said during a dangerous factory explosion that occurred in China, a monkey was recorded on camera saving a puppy. It's a nice thought, isn't it? And it's an interesting picture. But we just say if David Cameron is the monkey, then the puppy must be Nick Clegg. We'll leave you with that thought.
Can I just tell everyone to go on if they want to see the leaflets for the Bradbury that have been made and will be available next Wednesday at College Green at 11:30. They are on the Bradbury Pound Facebook page. I was sent them, so there's a picture of what they're going to look like, and they'll be handing out and being given to you when you get up to Westminster.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for joining us. That's it for today. It'll be Mike and Patrick Henningsen reporting the news tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye.